Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we've been able to get breaking news from multiple areas of the world, as we have been able to confirm that the state of Ukraine conducted a successful attack on the port of Novorossiysk overnight, shooting down an SU-30 in the process, and also causing possible significant damage to port infrastructure, although exact video and picture evidence of that incident is not yet seen at this moment. Meanwhile, the United States of America has unveiled the Collaborative Combat Aircraft program today, a program that is supposed to bring AI to the skies of the U.S. Air Force and to allow for the United States Air Force to power project in means and measures that have never been seen before. Meanwhile, the United States of America has stated there will be further Ukraine support, with President Zelensky further adding that it could be nearly $30 billion over the course of this year alone, more money than has ever been provided to the state of Ukraine in the course of any other year so far. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces have requested the Russian Federation to conduct a ceasefire. Starting on May 7th and lasting 30 days, the ceasefire would ensure that the Russian Federation's Victory Day parade would actually fall under it, but also secure a longer lasting peace to move towards more permanent steps of creating a permanent peace treaty. The Russian Federation refused this, and for this reason, May 9th will not be conducted during the time of peace, and for this reason, Putin will now be attending the massive Victory Day parade of the mighty and invincible Russian Federation's armed forces, which can no longer be defeated in armed combat via Zoom because of the fear that they could be defeated at the parade. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear that the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland will no longer be operating the AS-90, as all current SPGs have actually been provided to the state of Ukraine instead. Meanwhile, U.S. actions against the Houthis have continued, as the USS Carl Vinson has now arrived in theater to be able to assist the USS Harry S Truman conducting airstrikes against the Houthis. However, the airstrikes are still proving to be largely questionable in their efficacy, as we have been able to hear that another Houthi drone fired by the Houthis at Israel was shot down over southern Israel last night. And in the meantime, we've also been able to hear that the Indian defense minister is now going to be canceling their trip to the Russian Federation amidst the fact that the Ukrainians will not be conducting a ceasefire, and also due to the fact that the Republic of India doesn't really have as strong a relation with the Russian Federation as it had in the past. But nevertheless, we have absolutely major news to be covering from every single corner of the world today, and moving into our first and major piece, we were able to hear that the Ukrainian armed forces conducted a significant attack against the port of Novorossiysk overnight. We were able to hear that it involved a large amount of air and naval drones attempting to strike at the port of Novorossiysk itself. We actually were able to see some footage here published by the Russians showing those very drones making their way towards Novorossiysk. This footage was filmed somewhere near the area just southeast of the Kerch Strait, about a couple of dozen miles from that area, meaning that this was also getting quite close to the port of Novorossiysk itself. The Russian helicopters involved in this footage are assumed to be a part of a defensive patrol that is based out of the area of Novorossiysk from a nearby airfield, and we can see here that the Russian Federation was attempting to target and destroy these naval drones, and ended up successfully hitting and knocking out several. The Russian Federation was continuing to hit these drones in an attempt to stop the attacks, but it does appear that the Russian Federation was not able to successfully stop all drones, and some of them did make their way into Novorossiysk, successfully hitting their targets. Although, once again, we have not gotten a lot of video or picture evidence from the port of Novorossiysk, letting us see exactly what was hit down there and what kind of damage was caused. But we can see here the Russian Federation attempting to hit as many drones as they possibly can. But in the meanwhile, while the Russian Federation was attempting to paint a picture of a major success, we were able to hear explosions coming from the port itself in the middle of broad daylight, largely suggesting that some air and naval drones made it into the port and were able to hit their targets, which we can hear in this clip right here. We hear what appears to be air defense fire near Novorossiysk. We can also see what appears to be a plume of smoke from the air defense system on top of one of the hills near the port. You now hear an explosion. and that was the end of that clip. But nevertheless, it does appear that there were some drones that did make it through to the port of Novorossiysk, but once again, damage assessments have not come out yet because this attack only occurred a few mere hours ago, and for this reason, it is too young in the attack to actually be able to get a proper damage assessment and speak to the actual details of what was hit inside the port of Novorossiysk. One thing we can confirm, however, so far, because we do have video and picture evidence confirming this, is that while the naval drones were taking their storied journey all the way from around Odessa and around the Crimean Peninsula to Novorossiysk, something absolutely incredible happened in the process. A Russian SU-30SM, which is one of the more advanced versions of a Russian SU-20 platform seen here, was shot down by a Ukrainian unmanned drone that was sea-based. It is the first of its kind in history to ever actually happen, and we were able to see the video and picture evidence of that right here as the drone on board, the camera on board the drone was able to actually film and watch the SU-30 get hit directly by the missile that the drone fired. This is quite literally the first time in history that we've ever seen a naval unmanned drone actively shoot down an aircraft of any type of another country's. It's actually quite amazing to see. What we largely know is that it was a Magura drone, which I'll pull up a Magura drone for all of y'all real quick here to show this to y'all. A Magura V5 drone as seen here, but the Magura had been modified with a special an air missile rack on board the top of the drone that was able to hold two R-73 missiles. R-73 Archers, as they're called by their NATO designation, are a fairly decent missile, and for that reason, I guess the best way that we could compare it is that it is generally something along the lines of, say, the AIM-9L here in the West. But here's a picture of an R-73 right here. Two of these were mounted on board the Magura drone, and the Magura drone appears to have had a mission of protecting its other naval attack drones as they were trying to make their way to their target from some kind of an air threat, which ended up being this SU-30. The R-73s were able to get a successful lock onto the SU-30. The Magura then fired off only one of the R-73s, and because of the close proximity of the aircraft to the drone attacking formation, it was a successful hit, and the SU-30 was shot down. It is a pretty wild and crazy thing to think that we're seeing an era of drone warfare where a naval-based drone can fire off a surface-to-air missile and successfully take down a Russian jet, but that is the era that we were living in, and this was probably the most damaging thing to result from the attack, considering that SU-30s cost approximately $35 million per aircraft. But we can see the SU-30 falling into the sea right there. And we can also see what appears to be possibly a pilot that ejected or another piece of falling debris. But that is the end of that clip, and largely the end of our story on air right now for the Novorossiysk attack. And while we have not been able to get damage assessments out of the port itself, the fact that the Ukrainians were able to shoot down an SU-30SM is largely going to make this attack a success. All of the drones combined in the attack, from what we would understand, even if there were nearly 8 of them involved, would cost somewhere in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in return, they were able to shoot down a $35 million aircraft. So in general, in terms of the cost disparity, this was a majorly successful attack just in the damage instilled on the single aircraft alone. Meanwhile, we have been able to hear, speaking of aircraft, that the United States of America is developing a brand new kind of a weapon system of its own, the new Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program. This is an incredibly interesting one, and we were able to get an official unveiling of it today in this video here provided by the U.S. Department of Defense, which we can see right here. I'm going to be muting the audio just in case if it is copyright, but we can see them unveiling in the hangar one of the prototypes for the new Collaborative Combat Aircraft Program, which we can see right here. This little aircraft doesn't really look like much, and I'm sure many people could agree. It's wildly small. It appears to be in some sort of a testing hangar, for example, a wind tunnel hangar. But nevertheless, what this is going to be the development of the U.S. Air Force's combat doctrine, and also start helping greatly with U.S. air power projection in the future. What this thing is that it's a AI/human operated drone that will be able to operate alongside aircraft such as the F-35 or other future generation, 6th generation aircraft like the F-47, well on into the future as the Air Force continues to evolve its technology and its combat doctrines to be as effective as it can be in the fighting age. The general concept and idea behind these sorts of AI or drone operated fighter aircraft like this one is that in the modern age of warfare, Aircraft are becoming an increasingly necessary sort of a thing to have, and especially for air interdiction missions, where you stop enemy aircraft from coming into a specific area, or largely area denial. For this reason, an AI aircraft is a far easier alternative than that of a conventional aircraft, because with a conventional aircraft, you have to go through an incredibly long and laborious training process to have a pilot to operate the aircraft. Not only that, it makes it incredibly difficult to conduct power projection for those reasons, because you have to actually build up the crews necessary to be able to maintain and field these aircraft, and not only that, the pilots to fly them. The AI aircraft such as these cut down on that tremendously. They are usually mechanically a little bit more simpler. Of course, computer-wise, they are far more advanced, but on the mechanical side, they are slightly simplified. They also do not require a pilot to be trained to operate them, for example, having to tolerate high Gs and other kinds of situations. The drone operations are a lot easier to implement, and this means that you can have a lot more of these aircraft in the sky. Not only that, but some of these aircraft are going to be AI operated almost entirely, meaning that a single pilot in the air in, say, an F-35 or an F-47 will have about 4 to 5 AI wingmen to be able to assist him at any given moment inside of an air combat scenario. There are a load of reasons why this is actually a very beneficial sort of technological development, and once again, I'm trying to cover the base of everything that this entire program is trying to accomplish, and there's actually loads and myriads of different kinds of things. Some of y'all heard that this would be slightly operated by a drone pilot, but at the same time would almost entirely be AI. And from what I was able to read up on this, the new Collaborative Combat Air program is pretty much trying to achieve all of these things in different avenues, and there's actually, currently, from what we know, 2 different prototypes of this aircraft. One that is largely AI operated, and one that is slightly AI operated, but also largely drone pilot operated as well. Nevertheless, it is a massive evolution and a massive step forward for the U.S. Air Force, and it is certainly showing us that the future of air combat, much like ground combat, is starting to largely lie within the drone sphere or that of AI-assisted technology. An incredibly interesting kind of a development. Meanwhile, we also were able to hear that further support to the state of Ukraine, while they're currently conducting a fairly large attack on Novorossiysk, will actually be continuing, as we were able to hear that Ukraine may receive $30 billion in aid from the U.S. after signing a subsoil agreement, according to Zelensky. The aid was approved by the previous administration for about 25 to 26 years, and these $30 billion will be the American side's contribution to the Reconstruction Investment Fund. And according to Zelensky, Ukraine will then give its half to the fund little by little, and this is an agreement. So it appears that the state of Ukraine will be able to get $30 billion so far from the United States, largely in humanitarian aid. It's going to be put towards rebuilding the state of Ukraine, so that is not directly contributing to military aid, but still it is an incredibly large amount of humanitarian aid that's going to be provided by the United States over the course of this year. As a matter of fact, on a year-to-year basis, that is the largest amount that's going to be provided in a single yearly basis to date. Meanwhile, outside of that news, and inside of the state of Ukraine, we have been able to hear some interesting developments about the May 9th Victory Day Parade. The Russian Federation actually proposed to the state of Ukraine, which we did not know until recently, that the state of Ukraine and the Russian Federation could enter into a 3-day ceasefire lasting over May 8th, 9th, and 10th, pretty much meaning that the Russian Federation was wanting to enact a ceasefire so that way the state of Ukraine would not fire on the May 9th Victory Day Parade. The Ukrainians counteroffered with a more serious proposal than treating a ceasefire like a ceasefire of convenience, and wanted to present a ceasefire that would actually start moving the war in Ukraine to a peace, as Ukraine did state that they were ready for a ceasefire starting on May 7th, but for an entire 30-day period. And if the Russians do not agree, there will not be a ceasefire at all. Zelensky also stated that Ukraine cannot guarantee the safety of foreign leaders in Moscow on May 9th, and also stated that playing the game so that Putin could have the impression of breaking out of isolation, making it comfortable and safe for all the leaders who come to Red Square, no one will help Putin with that. It's an incredibly interesting thing to see that the Russian Federation was actually going to leverage a short-term ceasefire just so that way they could go out and have a propaganda coup against the Ukrainians and say that they're invincible and legendary. But now it appears that the state of Ukraine is throwing that on its head by actually presenting a serious ceasefire proposal and not a convenient one, and now the Russian Federation has openly rejected that, and for that reason there will be no ceasefire over May 9th of this year. And for that reason, things have started to fall off. Putin is not going to be attending the Victory Day parade at all this year in person. He is now going to be attending it via Zoom. So that is a pretty funny one right there, to be entirely honest with y'all, because we were able to hear that it was due to safety concerns regarding his security that he will not be able to attend May 9th. But I guess Xi Jinping and everyone else will have to be there in person in case of a Ukrainian drone hits. It'll get them, but it won't get Putin. I also guess that the hundreds or thousands of spectators that will be there just don't get to attend it via Zoom either, and there's thousands of Russian soldiers that will be on Red Square, along with all of the armored columns and air columns, will also have to attend in person while Putin's attending via Zoom. A little bit funny to see that that Putin says that the Russians are invincible and legendary, and that they're winning the war to a degree seen like no other so far against the state of Ukraine, but they're winning it so poorly that he's got to end up hiding on a Zoom call in the middle of the Victory Day parade as they're claiming all of these major Russian successes and propaganda victories. It all ends up coming down to they actually don't believe any of that, and if the state of Ukraine isn't going to be in an active ceasefire with the Russians during May 9th, he's not even going to attend it in person. A little bit ironic on that one. And we also were able to hear that the Indian Minister of Defense has also canceled his plans to visit Russia during May 9th because Modi originally refused to go. Now the Indian Defense Minister is also refusing to go, possibly because there's going to be no ceasefire on May 9th, or possibly because the Republic of India isn't wanting to show a clear signal that they're at all aligned with the Russians at this point, as we have seen a distancing happening over the years between India and Russia, as well as India and China, as the groups continue to make it incredibly clear that their interests or beliefs are starting to greatly, really verge from each other in opposite directions. Meanwhile, while all of this was going on about the Victory Day parade and that whole high drama was occurring on the high seas, I suppose, it is time for us to move on into the high seas quite literally, as we were able to hear that the USS Carl Vinson is now in the area of the Middle East. We were able to see that this was actually retweeted by the USS Harry S Truman account, which is kind of funny that they were retweeting this because, as many know, the USS Harry S Truman is currently involved in bombing the Houthis at this moment in air operations and has had their deployment extended. They are now joined at this very moment by the USS Carl Vinson, which is another Nimitz-class aircraft carrier, much like the USS Harry S Truman, and it will now be assisting in conducting operations against the Houthis as well, and conducting airstrikes from the decks of its own aircraft carrier, instead of it all being held up on the shoulders of the USS Harry S Truman. Now we can actually see some of the clips right here from the Carl Vinson as it entered the area. We see them conducting underway replenishment. And moving on to our next clip, we also see them launching Super Hornets from the deck of the aircraft carrier. We can also see them conducting normal deck operations here in this clip as well. And in the last picture, we can also see them still conducting more carrier operations at night. I also forgot to mention that the USS Carl Vinson, unlike the Harry S Truman, actually does have a squadron that is equipped with F-35Bs. They're F-35Cs, which were currently not available in theater because the USS Harry S Truman did not have any air squadrons on board equipped with the F-35C. So it is quite nice to see that they will be having a little bit of additional air power, and not only that, stealth air power that will be available in the area. But while the U.S. Air Forces and Navy are making an incredibly large presence known around the area of Houthi-controlled Yemen, it appears that it's not really producing the kind of results that a lot of people would have expected, as we were able to hear that once again last night, the Israelis ended up shooting down another drone that had been fired by the Houthis. For the second day in a row, the Israeli Air Force downed a one-way attack drone approaching from the east, likely launched by the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen. It is becoming incredibly clear as time keeps passing by that these endless airstrikes against the Houthis are not actually producing any kind of tangible or realistic results in dealing with the threat, and as a matter of fact, it appears that the Houthis are continuing on with their normal pace of hostile actions as time continues to pass by. It's largely showing that the air campaign is not as successful or not as potent as it was believed to have been, and it appears that further action would be needed to deal with the Houthis, possibly a limited ground operation inside the area of western Yemen in support of the Yemeni government to be able to crush the Houthis and bring the majority of western Yemen back under Yemeni government control. That may be the next necessary step to actually deal with the Houthis, but then it becomes a question of whether people in the public or the government would support such an operation where U.S. ground forces are once again involved in another ground operation inside the Middle East. Nevertheless, that is all of the major breaking news that we had today, and I have to thank each and every one of y'all so much once again for watching so far and enjoying this, because it has been quite an interesting thing to put together and present the news for thousands of days at this point, and we thank you all so much once again for hopefully listening and watching another day. If y'all have enjoyed, and this is your first time watching, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and if you really enjoyed the channel, support us on Patreon. The link is in the description below. I have to give a massive thanks and a huge shout out to everyone who always is supporting us on Patreon, because those folks are helping this channel to be possible and helping us to do this as a full-time job. Absolutely nobody has to support the channel either on Patreon or through Super Chats or through anything else, but I have to extend the largest thanks to all of those folks, because they are the ones who make this channel reality day in and day out, month by month, year by year. And so a huge thanks to you all once again for watching, everyone who's supporting, and everyone who's just watching and passing by to get a little bit of news today. And we will see you all in the next one. Thank you all so much once again, and take care.